For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dhlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss Mandela's masculinities. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Why is it so important for you to bring gender and Mandela together?
You know, our constitution is one of the most advanced constitutions in the world with regard to gender issues, gender equality, non-tolerance of gender violence. But in spite of this, we have extensive gender violence and sexually based violence as well in this country. And you don't really have a serious debate or discussion about gender. You have the ANC Women's League purporting to be the representatives of women, but they're not really a serious player in any debate about gender. And why I raise the question of Mandela in relation to gender is, first of all, when people discuss Mandela, apart from me, there's only one other person I know who has dealt with Mandela and gender, and not in the way I'm dealing with it. This Eleka Burma, in a short book on Mandela, has dealt with him, but mainly symbolically. Now, I feel that Mandela is very important because everyone admires Mandela, and Mandela was not a perfect example of male conduct in all of his life. He was continually changing. He was at one stage rough and tough, and he wasn't always this kindly man holding babies and children, things like that. So what's interesting in terms of the argument that I have tried to put is that Mandela was constantly changing. And for all of us, it is encouraging to know that the great person that Mandela was not evident in his early life. And he changed. He continually changed. And that is very important. Now, when Mandela was a young boy, he grew up playing mainly with boys. And he was engaging in rough war-type games. And in Tembuland at the time, even though they were conquered people, the notion of masculinity was a warrior-type masculinity. So as a boy, he was encouraged to grow up to become a man who could be a warrior, who could recover the sense of dignity, sense of prestige, that a defeated people had lost. And the main way in which that was encouraged was not through telling stories about wise men, but it was through telling stories about brave warriors who had resisted conquest and things like that. Also, when Mandela he was in Tembuland until about 1941, if I remember correctly. His guardian, Chief Yongintaba Dalindyebo, the acting regent of the Abatembu, arranged a marriage for Mandela and his son Justice. And that was customary at the time to just do that. And he and Justice were not happy. I don't know if they were unhappy about an arranged marriage or they were unhappy about who was chosen for them. And they fled to the Rand. And what's interesting about Mandela, before he went to the Rand, he says at the second last page of his book, Long Walk to Freedom, I was not born with a hunger to be free. He believed that he had all the freedom that he wanted where he was, because he was not meeting a lot of whites. And also, he was in the domain of the regent, acting regent, and many whites who met the acting regent, the regent treated them as equals to him, not as inferior. Like when he went to Clarkbury, the regent said to Mandela, treat Reverend Harris with the same respect as you would treat me. In other words, he was worried that Reverend Harris the white would not be treated with the same respect as the regent who was a black person. So he grew up in this environment where he didn't encounter a lot of racism till he arrived on the Rand, and he did encounter it there. And luckily for him, he met Sisulu soon afterwards, and he became involved in the ANC Youth League. But Mandela was not as calm and collected as someone like Sisulu. You know, the Youth League believed in Africans must go it alone. Now, Mandela used to take that to be a justification for breaking up meetings of the Indian Congress and of the Communist Party, things like this. People like Sisulu were a little bit more restrained with these things. Also, at various points he was reprimanded. When they were going to remove people from Sophia Town, he said, "Over my dead body." Now, if you say "over my dead body," it means you'll fight, you see. Also, before the ANC decided on armed struggle, Mandela said, "We have closed the door, the period of non-violence, the curtain has closed," or some such thing. And the ANC hadn't made that decision. So the Mandela who went to jail was a very different person from the Mandela that we know in the 1990s. He was a fiery young man. He was the first commander of MK. In the eyes of people, he was reviewed as a warrior type person, as a fighter.
So why do you see Mandela's relationship to war and peace as being so important?
You see, in the imagery around Mandela, the Drum magazine, all these magazines used to love taking photographs of him, and especially when he got married to Winnie. You know, they were like sort of models. And one of the Mandela's pictures are, on the one hand, of a very flashily dressed man, very handsome, but then there's a picture of him boxing. He used to go and train as a boxer. He'd learnt it at school. He used to go training with a champion boxer. There's this picture of them sparring on top of some building in Johannesburg. So the imagery of Mandela is associated with fighting. And there's a waiter, Leslie Diale, who is interviewed in one of the books that I've read, and he is serving some people, and the people there know that he reads the newspapers. So they say to him, "What is in the newspapers today?" So he says, "Mandela is going to be in court today." So the people there say, "Here, I'll beat him up." Something like that. So the imagery that people had around Mandela was of a fighter. And he went to jail as a military person. What happened in jail, he says he matured in jail. And he sat in jail and he thought, how can we break this impasse, this situation where there is no end in sight, and the ANC, MK is not strong enough to defeat the apartheid regime. The apartheid regime is not strong enough to stop the violence. He then put out feelers to talk to the apartheid regime, and when he came out of jail, he made up his mind that he would do what he could to make the peace work. And Mandela is on the one hand spontaneous, but he has also carefully thought out how he will come across to people. On the one hand, he had to reassure his followers that talking to the regime was not selling out. But on the other hand, he had to reassure whites that they didn't have something to fear from him. And I give the example in the article of when people were toy-toying. The toy-toy is a warlike dance. You say with things like shoot, shoot, shoot to kill. Now when Mandela went and did the toy-toy, he had a smiling, reassuring face. So he was consciously trying to create the conditions for peace. This thing of going to see Betsy Verwoerd, going to the Springbok rugby players, all these things, personally, I didn't like them at the time. But in retrospect, I realized they were part of his plan of making the ANC appear less dangerous to these people. And so that's why I stress war and peace, and it ties up with what I said in the beginning. Mandela changed a lot over his life. And I think that's what we must learn. If we have got some things that are wrong with us that need to be corrected, we must know that we're not made unchangeably. We can all change, we can all contribute to a better South Africa.
Thank you, Professor. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about Mandela's masculinities.